The Front for Victory is a center-left Peronist electoral alliance in Argentina, and it is formally a faction of the Justicialist Party. Both the former President Néstor Kirchner and the former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner belong to this party, located on the center-left of the mainstream Argentine political spectrum. The party was led by Néstor Kirchner until his death in 2010. The Front for Victory is ideologically identified with what has been called Kirchnerism. Legally, the Front should not be confused with the Party for Victory, which is just one of the political parties in its history. Due to internal disagreements over leadership, the Justicialist Party did not participate as such in the 2003 presidential elections, so the Front for Victory was established on behalf of the presidential candidacy of Néstor Kirchner, in opposition to two other Peronist tickets. At the 2005 legislative elections, the FPV, again running against other Peronist lists, won 50 of the 127 elected deputies and 14 of the 24 elected senators, thus obtaining the majority in both houses of Congress. At the 2007 presidential election, FPV rallied through the Plural Consensus Alliance, including non-PJ candidates. Its presidential candidate Cristina Fernández de Kirchner won the presidency on the first round, obtaining 45.29% of the total votes, some 22% ahead of her nearest challenger, this being the widest margin any candidate had got on any modern election held in Argentina at the time. At the 2009 midterm legislative election, the FPV lost its congressional majorities in both chambers, gaining just 30.80% of the national votes, thus narrowly becoming the first minority party at the Argentine National Congress, while the Civic and Social Agreement Alliance arrived a close second. At the October 2011 elections, however, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner secured her re-election with 54.11% of the votes in the first round, and a 38% lead over her nearest challenger, much widening its former performance of 2007. With 11,864,456 votes, Cristina Fernández also became the most voted person in the history of Argentine democracy, and the FPV achieved a first-time third consecutive mandate for a Peronist alliance. At the 2013 legislative election, the FPV and its allies marginally won the elections, maintaining its dominance over both chambers of the Congress. Principles. The Front for Victory has a declaration of principles headed by the motto, Argentina, conviction and ability to build a new country. The FPV takes its principles from what it calls an intolerable gap between the rich and the poor, and questions the role of those political parties allied to the regime in the 2001 crisis that affected the country. Hence the vital need of deepening a process of social justice, which by leaving behind a past most Argentines want to overcome, will allow the construction of a new space for political and institutional management in Argentina. The Declaration of Principles finishes explaining that imagining and building a new country requires conviction and ability for joining the pieces of a fragmented society and the will to do so, not from a single political party, but from the formation of a broad national front which can bring us back as a nation, this Argentina that can't wait any longer. Member parties. The Front for Victory is composed by Presidency of Néstor Kirchner, 2003 to 2007. In 2003 the FPV with the candidacy of Néstor Kirchner came second in the presidential elections with 22% of the vote, behind former President Carlos Menem with 24%. as provided in the Constitution, corresponded settling the election in a runoff, but Menem, with polls favoring Kirchner by more than 60%, withdrew from it, being for that reason elected President of Argentina, Néstor Kirchner, for the period 2003 to 10 December 2007. At the time, Front of Victory had the decisive support of the leaders of Buenos Aires, with involvement of the Justicialist political force, of whom until then was President Eduardo Duhalde. In the 2005 elections there was a break between the Peronist Kirchner and Duhalde, which led to the exclusion of the latter from the Front for Victory and electoral confrontation between the two sectors. The decision to move against corporate economic, agricultural and livestock sector employers of soybean roots caused the confrontation. In 2005, FPV presented as presidential candidate Cristina Fernández to Kirchner, while Duhaldism introduced Hilda Chiche González de Duhalde, the wife of the former president, being Cristina the first winner by a large margin. During the Kirchner administration, an advance payment of the total debt to the International Monetary Fund was made, declaring the aim of ending the subjection of the respective national economic policies to the international body. Afterwards the swap debt is performed, which began renegotiations for the bonds that had been in default since 2001. As a symbol of his administration, pursued an active policy to promote human rights. His government incorporated members of recognized human rights organizations and prompted the prosecution of those responsible for crimes against humanity that occurred during the 70s, made by the AAA and the Government of National Reorganization process. To carry it out, supporters in Congress voted the cancellation of the laws of due obedience and full stop, which had remained restraining such judgments since the government of Raúl Alfonsín. This decision was subsequently ratified by the judicial. Regarding international policy, in November of that year was held in Mar del Plata the IV Summit of the Americas, where Kirchner said a rejection of the ALCA proposed by the United States. This is considered the foundational moment for UNASUR. Néstor Kirchner died on October 27, 2010. He was 60 years old. Presidency of Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, 2007 to 2015. On July 18, 2007, Senator of FPV, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner was presented for the presidential elections of October. On October 28, the candidate of the Front for Victory, Cristina Fernández, won the general election with 45.29%, leading by over 22 points to Elisa Carrió. The formula was imposed in almost all provincial districts and thus became the first woman elected to the office of President of Argentina. She assumed this role on December 10, 2007. One of the first steps taken by President Fernández was the creation of the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, designating responsible Lino Baranao, a renowned molecular biologist. The move was accompanied by the announcement of the creation of a scientific technological center in Buenos Aires, composed of 3 institutes: social and human sciences, biomedical sciences and biotechnology, and sciences technologicas. The March 11, 2008, the Argentine Economy Minister Martin Lusto announced the enactment of Resolution 125. In the month of March 2008 was passed Resolution 125/2008, establishing a new system of export duties on exports, holding its increase or decrease to international price developments. This caused a conflict with the larger state owners from the agricultural sector, who protested against the government's decision to change the tax system of exports. During the protest, the landowners and main producers declared a series of measures such such as roadblocks for national disruption of basic food supply and of long-distance transportation and agricultural exports, making partial lockouts of roadblocks and other ports and direct action measures. President Cristina Fernández suspended the resolution and sent Congress a bill on the tax on exports of grains and compensation for small and medium producers. So it was the legislature that ultimately resolved the situation. The project received preliminary approval in Congress, but the vote in the Senate was not successful, scoring the equalizer in the vote, and was the vice president of the nation Julio Cleto Cobos who had negative tie by voting against the project. The government focused on making social action measures, among which we can highlight the Connect Equality program by INSES, consisting of the delivery and commissioning of 2 million net books with internet access to all public elementary and secondary schools. The Universal Child Allowance, which generalizes the family allowance per child for all children under 18 whose parents are unemployed or work in the informal economy for pay no more than the minimum wage, vital and mobile, including monotributistas. This benefit was extended to pregnant women over 12 weeks gestation. Along with these, there were also redistributive public policies, such as increasing the percentage of GDP spent on education, which grew from 3.64% in 2003 to 6.02% in 2010. In absolute terms, increased from 14.501 million pesos in 2003 to 89,924,000 pesos in 2010, a 520% more. School construction between 2003 and 2010 were built over 1,000 schools benefiting 500,000 students. The second period of increased school construction in the history of Argentina. It also promoted the adoption of the law of mobility retirement, which sets a minimum of 2 annual increases in pensions. In addition, measures were taken as the recovery of Aerolíneas Argentinas and Austral Airlines, which was proposed by a bill introduced by President Fernández to rescue companies, by approving the agreement between the national government and the group Interinvest of July 17, 2008, whereby the Argentine government acquired the shares of these and other related companies. Also through another law, renationalized the military aircraft factory, given under concession to U.S. company Lockheed Martin in 1995. In 2009, the Parliament sent the draft law on audiovisual communication services, which came to displace the old media law, which was passed by the de facto government of Jorge Rafael Videla. The bill was debated in about 30 forums across the length and breadth of the country, which exposed citizens, journalists, owners of radio and TV channels, and managed to introduce some 140 amendments on a 150 points proposal. Finally, the bill was passed by a comfortable majority in both legislative chambers. The project raged the government's confrontation with the major media outlets of Argentina, facing a strong campaign to discredit her image. In 2011, the confrontation with the media worsened after boosting in Parliament a bill to declare of public interest the manufacture of paper for newsprint. Finally, the law was passed and Papel Prensa, the only producer of the product in Argentina, to then in the hands of the 2 major newspapers in the country, went on to provide the material at the same price to all who required it daily. In terms of sovereignty, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner has taken steps towards resuming negotiations with the United Kingdom over the Falkland Islands. On April 16, 2012 announced the involvement in the oil company YPF, whose majority stake was owned by the Spanish company Repsol, which had previously been questioned by deficiencies in oil supplies and new explorations. Also sent to Congress a bill to expropriate 51% of the shares and regain state control over the non-renewable natural resource. The announcement drew a resounding support from the public and most of the political spectrum, both the ruling party and opposition. Finally, the draft became law by a large majority in both houses of parliament. Electoral history: presidential elections, congressional elections.